Evil bandits beat up Aunt in front of her niece, but after a few minutes a wild wolf appeared, and what he does is unbelievable and leaves everyone in shock. Elizabeth cared for her niece, Marina, with all the love in the world. Since Marina's parents passed away, she had done everything to ensure that the girl had a home filled with love and protection. Yet, despite her efforts, Elizabeth knew that Marina still felt the loss of her parents, a void in her little heart that nothing could quite fill. Marina was a curious girl, always exploring the village where they lived. Each part of that place seemed like a mystery waiting to be uncovered by her. But Elizabeth noticed something special in these moments. As Marina discovered new things, it was as if she felt a bit closer to her parents, as if she wanted to feel they were still with her somehow. Elizabeth understood that the girl kept a living memory of them in every adventure, as if she wanted them to see what she saw. Elizabeth missed them too. Watching Marina, so full of life with her mother's curious eyes, made her heart ache with nostalgia and a bit of fear. Marina's mother, who was also Elizabeth's sister, had been so much like the girl, quick to smile, with contagious energy and an adventurous spirit. Elizabeth remembered the times they'd explored the surroundings together, brimming with excitement and without a care. These memories were a mix of longing and joy, but also a deep sadness for all that had happened. Sometimes, Marina would ask about her parents, and Elizabeth would do her best to talk about them with affection, trying not to let the sadness show too much. She would tell stories of how Marina's mother was brave and loving and how her father always looked at them with pride. These moments reminded Elizabeth that, despite the pain, she was there to keep Marina's parents' memory alive, which made her feel stronger. Despite her worries, Elizabeth didn't want to hold Marina back from living her life. Every time she saw her niece smiling and discovering the world, it felt like a piece of her sister was there, shining again. This made Elizabeth feel that, somehow, the family story lived on through Marina's curiosity and heart. One day, during one of her explorations around the village, Marina decided to venture a bit farther, reaching the forest, a place filled with tall trees and mysterious shadows. It was a peaceful day, with sunlight filtering through the leaves and a gentle breeze swaying the branches. Marina walked slowly, listening to the birdsong and the rustling of leaves underfoot. She loved the forest, where it always seemed like something special was waiting for her. Suddenly, behind some bushes, Marina heard a strange sound, a faint whimper, almost like a plea for help. Curious yet cautious, she approached slowly and, there, hidden among the plants, was a wolf. It seemed injured, lying down and breathing with difficulty, with eyes that were alert but tired, as if it had been through something very tough. Marina knew that wolves were wild animals and, in other circumstances, she would probably have backed away. But seeing the wolf's sad eyes and vulnerable state filled her heart with compassion. She could only think that it needed help. With great care, Marina took a bit of water from her bottle and offered it to the wolf. It looked at her with a mixture of suspicion and gratitude, and slowly, it began to drink. She wanted to do more, to help that creature, but she knew she needed assistance. So, she ran back home with her heart racing, eager to tell Elizabeth about the wolf. When Marina arrived home, her face was lit up with excitement, and the words spilled out of her almost without pause. "Aunt Elizabeth, I found a wolf in the forest. It's hurt and needs help." At first, Elizabeth froze, feeling a chill up her spine. She looked at Marina, trying to process what the girl had just said. But soon, that initial shock turned into a serious, worried expression. Elizabeth, who had always been the loving and caring aunt, felt a mix of fear and irritation rising within her. Her expression turned stern, and her usual gentleness was replaced by a seriousness Marina rarely saw. "Marina, what were you thinking? Going to the forest alone and approaching a wolf? Do you have any idea of the danger you put yourself in?" Elizabeth's voice trembled, a mix of anger and anxiety. She couldn't believe her niece had taken such a risky action, and the fear that something might have happened was almost unbearable. Marina, who had been beaming with excitement, began to retreat, sensing the gravity of the situation. Elizabeth continued, still visibly shaken. "Wolves are wild animals, Marina. You don't know what they're capable of, especially when they're injured." Elizabeth's irritation didn't come only from Marina's actions but from something deeper, the fear of reliving, with Marina, the loss she had already suffered in the past. "Before we continue, Remember to like and subscribe if you love animals and their touching stories. That night, after the tense conversation about the wolf, Elizabeth realized that Marina still didn't understand the reason for her intense fear. She decided it was time to share a story she had kept deep inside her heart. She sat down beside her niece and took a deep breath, as if preparing to face something very painful. Marina looked at her aunt, curious and attentive, sensing that something serious was about to unfold. "Marina," Elizabeth began, her voice soft but full of sadness, "there's something I need you to know. You may not fully understand, but I need you to listen to me." Elizabeth paused, trying to find the right words, then continued, "Your mother, like you, was always passionate about animals and nature. She loved walking around the village, exploring every corner, getting to know every living creature. To her, every animal was just a helpless creature, someone who needed care and love. And I thought it was beautiful, but also dangerous." Marina listened intently to every word, noticing the pain that appeared in her aunt's eyes. Elizabeth hesitated but decided to continue, even though it was difficult. "One day, your mother and father went out on one of those adventures. They were on a road near the forest, late at night. Along the way, an animal suddenly crossed in front of the car. Your father tried to swerve, but there wasn't enough time." Elizabeth paused, her eyes filled with tears, trying not to cry. She took a deep breath and went on. "Losing your mother was like losing a part of myself, Marina. I never fully recovered, you know? Since then, anything involving wild animals fills me with terrible fear. I don't want you to get hurt, to face the same risks. I need you to understand that." Marina, with eyes shining with emotion and sadness, finally understood the reason for her aunt's fear. Elizabeth wasn't just being strict, she was protecting her with all she had. For Elizabeth, losing Marina would mean reliving all that past pain. Elizabeth concluded, holding her niece's hand. "Your mother was brave, but that courage came at a high price. And I can't let that happen to you." From that moment on, Marina felt the weight of her aunt's words, understanding that her fear wasn't just caution, but a deep love and a loss that never truly healed. Even after hearing her aunt's painful story, Marina couldn't forget the injured wolf she had left in the forest. Those sad, tired eyes wouldn't leave her mind. She now understood Elizabeth's fear, and it made her heart ache. But at the same time, there was a voice inside her telling her that the wolf needed her, that it had no one else to help it. So, on a quiet morning, while Elizabeth was still asleep, Marina grabbed a small backpack, packed some pieces of food and a water bottle, and quietly slipped away to the forest. Fear and excitement walked hand in hand in her chest. She knew she was disobeying her aunt, but the thought of leaving the wolf alone and injured was unbearable to her. She felt that, in some way, helping the wolf was a way to honor her mother's love for animals. When she reached the spot where she had first found the wolf, Marina approached slowly, trying not to scare it. There it was, lying down, but now with its eyes alert, watching her. As Marina approached with such calmness, the wolf seemed to relax a little, as if it knew she wasn't a threat. Marina knelt beside it and gently placed some food in front of the wolf. It sniffed, hesitated for a moment, but soon began to eat slowly, as if feeling grateful. In the days that followed, Marina continued visiting the wolf in secret, always bringing a bit more food and water and watching it closely. She talked to it in a soft voice, as if they were old friends. She told it about her mother and how much she enjoyed being there with him. And slowly, the wolf began to trust her, allowing her to come closer each time. As time passed, Marina felt that the bond between them grew stronger. The wolf, who once seemed so frightened and frail, now looked at Marina with a sense of companionship, as if it trusted her completely. And Marina, even knowing she was disobeying her aunt, felt deep in her heart that she was doing the right thing. After all, she was following what her mother had taught her, caring for a creature in need without judging it through fear alone. This secret friendship became a special moment for Marina, a cherished secret she held close to her heart. Even knowing her aunt wouldn't approve, she felt that, in that forest, beside the wolf, she was a little closer to her mother and to what her mother believed in. After several days of secretly caring for the wolf, Marina noticed that it was beginning to move with more ease. The wound was nearly healed, and it now stood up with strength, as if its energy was returning. Marina felt immense joy for having helped her friend recover, but at the same time, a growing ache in her heart. She knew the moment of farewell was approaching. One morning, when Marina arrived at the forest with her backpack full of food and water, she found the wolf standing, looking in the direction she had come from. It was as if he had been waiting for her, with a calm and determined expression. Marina approached slowly, and the wolf lowered himself by her side, accepting the last pieces of food she had brought. She gently petted his head, as if wanting to convey all the gratitude and affection she felt for him. The wolf looked into Marina's eyes, as if silently saying, "I'm well now, I can go my own way." Marina understood at that moment that it was time to let him go. With a deep sigh, she whispered, "Go, my friend. You're free." But the words barely came out, as the farewell was harder than she had imagined. The wolf then walked away slowly, pausing now and then to look back, as if wanting to imprint Marina's face in his memory. Marina waved each time, with teary eyes but a gentle smile. She knew he was ready to return to his home, the forest he so loved. When the wolf finally disappeared among the trees, Marina remained in silence, feeling a mix of sadness and pride. She knew that, by helping the wolf, she had followed her mother's example, caring for and protecting a life that needed her. And though the farewell left her heart empty, Marina felt she had made a true friendship, something she would never forget. A few weeks after saying goodbye to the wolf, the village was gripped by a sense of worry. Rumors of robberies began to circulate, and many villagers were scared, being more cautious with doors and windows. Elizabeth, always vigilant, reinforced the locks and asked Marina not to leave the house after dark. Even so, the sense of security they once had began to unravel. On a dark and silent night, Elizabeth and Marina were about to go to sleep when they heard a strange noise coming from the front door. At first, Elizabeth thought it might be the wind, but the sound repeated, louder and closer. Her heart started to race. Without making a sound, she got out of bed and went to Marina's room, where she found her niece awake, staring wide-eyed at the door. Before they could react, they heard the sound of heavy footsteps inside the house. Someone had entered. Elizabeth grabbed Marina's hand and pulled her into a corner, trying to protect her. She whispered for them to stay quiet, but it was hard to hide her fear. The sound of the footsteps grew louder, echoing down the hallway, and they both huddled, feeling the danger drawing near. Marina looked at her aunt, noticing the terror on her face. Elizabeth held her hand tightly, as if wanting to shield her from all the world's harm. But at that moment, they were both defenseless and completely frightened, not knowing what to do. Marina closed her eyes and wished, with all her might, that someone could help them. She even thought of the wolf, imagining how he had protected her in the forest and wishing he were there to protect them now. The footsteps drew even closer, and Elizabeth held Marina in her arms, as if her protection was all she had left. The house, once a safe and loving home, was now enveloped in a sense of danger and fear, leaving both of them at the mercy of the intruders. Elizabeth froze, her body motionless, while her heart felt as though it would leap out of her chest, fast and uncontrolled. Her mind was flooded with terrifying thoughts, and she struggled to push them away, but it was impossible. In that cutting silence, all she could think of was the terrible things that evil men might do to her and her niece, Marina, alone and defenseless in that house. It was as if a cold weight ran down her spine, leaving her even more paralyzed. As her fear grew, guilt began to set in, taking over her thoughts. How had she allowed this to happen? Why hadn't she thought of moving to a safer place, far from the vulnerability of that isolated home? She remembered the night she had considered finding an apartment in the city, where they might live without so much fear, where strong walls and close neighbors would offer more protection. But she always hesitated, thinking the village was a good place where Marina could play and grow up surrounded by nature, just as her mother had dreamed. But now, each second felt like a year to Elizabeth. She listened to the heavy steps of the intruders and imagined all the terrible things that could happen. She thought of Marina's face, so young and innocent, and despair took hold. The idea of losing her niece or seeing her suffer any harm was unbearable, as if a part of her own heart were at stake. Elizabeth and Marina huddled in a corner of the room, trying to stay as quiet as possible, their hearts beating so loudly it seemed to echo around them. The intruders' footsteps came closer, and Elizabeth could barely think of a way out. It was as if the world around them was closing in, leaving them with no escape. The intruders stormed into the house like a tempest, with firm steps and cold stares. Without hesitation, they began to rummage through the furniture, throwing objects to the ground, breaking everything in their path. The living room, once a cozy place full of memories, quickly became a scene of destruction. Each sound of shattering glass and splitting would seem to heighten the terror in Elizabeth and Marina's hearts, causing them to shrink further with each noise. One of the men, with a dark expression and eyes full of malice, came closer and shouted, demanding money. His voice was rough and merciless, and he didn't hide his anger. "Where's the money? Don't make us waste our time." The threat hung in the air, and Elizabeth, holding her niece tightly, felt her fear growing, almost paralyzing her. The aggressiveness of these men was frightening, and the look in their eyes showed they were willing to do anything to get what they wanted. While they searched every corner of the house, Elizabeth tried to keep Marina calm, but even the slight tremor in her own hands betrayed her. These men seemed to have no trace of compassion. Their movements were harsh, their words laden with hatred and greed. One of the men, his eyes filled with impatience and brutality, suddenly advanced toward Elizabeth. Without a second thought, he grabbed her hair forcefully and dragged her into the middle of the room. Elizabeth tried to resist, but the pain was unbearable, and each pull made her feel even more fragile and helpless. Her screams of pain echoed through the house, filling the space with a stifling sense of despair. Meanwhile, the other man held Marina with cold, firm hands, preventing her from moving. The terrified girl tried to break free, but the man's strength was far greater than hers. Her eyes filled with tears, and she could barely breathe as she watched her aunt in such a horrible situation. Marina's heart was racing, as if the fear and distress were too much for her small body to bear. Desperate and exhausted, Elizabeth tried to convince the men that there was no money. "Please, believe me. We don't have any money here. We have nothing of value." Her voice trembled, her fear mixed with panic. Each word seemed to increase the men's anger, who looked at her with cold indifference, as if they cared nothing for her pleas. "Stop lying," shouted the man holding her, threatening her with even more violence. Elizabeth felt trapped, and her only concern was protecting Marina. She tried, through sobs, to beg them not to harm her niece, but her voice grew weaker and weaker. Then something unbelievable happened. Amidst the chaos and despair, a powerful sound echoed through the house, a deep, menacing growl that made everyone stop. An enormous wolf appeared in the doorway, his eyes glowing with indescribable ferocity. With silent, firm steps, he advanced toward the man holding Elizabeth, never breaking his gaze. The intruder, upon noticing the animal's presence, was paralyzed for a moment, unable to believe what he was seeing. Before he could react, the wolf leaped at him with an agile and powerful jump, knocking him to the ground. The man let out a scream of pain and terror as he tried to free himself from the wolf's sharp teeth that threatened him. The other intruder, seeing what was happening, quickly backed away, his eyes wide with fear. Without a second thought, he released Marina and fled, followed by the others, who were already in a panic. Within seconds, the wolf had driven all the men away. The house, which moments before had been filled with terror, was now silent, with only the sound of Elizabeth and Marina's heavy breathing. The wolf remained still, like an imposing guardian, watching closely to ensure no danger remained. Elizabeth, still in shock, looked at the wolf with gratitude and admiration. Marina, her eyes shining, recognized the friend she had cared for in the forest. She took a step toward him, her heart filled with relief and affection, as the wolf approached her, as if assuring her that they were both safe. Without hesitation, Marina ran to the wolf with tears of relief in her eyes. She threw herself into his strong, furry embrace, hugging him like an old friend. "Aunt, this is the wolf I saved," she exclaimed, her voice full of emotion. "He came back and saved us too. Do you see, Aunt? He came to protect us." Elizabeth watched the scene, her heart racing as she tried to process what had just happened. Before her stood her niece, embracing the wolf who, moments before, had faced the intruders with fierce courage. But now, in Marina's presence, he was a different creature, calm, almost affectionate, allowing the girl to hold him as if they were old friends. Elizabeth felt a lump form in her throat. Everything she had always believed about wild animals seemed to crumble before that scene. She looked into the wolf's eyes and saw something deep in them, a kind of silent understanding, as if he recognized the girl who had cared for him in the forest and was repaying her act of kindness. The wolf wasn't just a beast. He had come there, perhaps guided by a bond Elizabeth would never have imagined possible between a wild animal and a child. Her heart filled with a mixture of admiration, surprise, and gratitude. The wolf, the creature she had once feared and dismissed, was now the hero who had saved her family. In that moment, Elizabeth realized that the world was much bigger and more mysterious than she had thought. Right there, in front of her, was proof that kindness and gratitude could arise from the most unexpected places. Thank you for watching to the end. Remember to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your opinion about this story.